What's up, YouTube? This is Ian's World 219 coming at you with another video. Today I wanted to go over Sebastian Fundora versus Chordale Booker. I wanted to take a closer look at this fight just to kind of expose some of the shady underworkings that happen behind closed doors with this sport, and how in certain situations the WBO will kind of use certain criteria they have created within their organization to squeeze in these guys to get a title fight when they really don't deserve it. Now, Chordale Booker, I'm not knocking him. Have nothing bad to say about the guy, and at the end of the day, this is boxing. Anything can happen in this sport. However, I just don't believe that he really deserves a shot at two of the most prestigious world titles the sport has to offer. And I'm going to kind of talk about and explain rationally and logically why this is, my case and my opinion here. Ultimately, I am going to try to keep my opinion out of this, and I'm just going to try to back this up with facts to support what I'm saying, but at the end of the day, man, I just find it very hard to believe that there is absolutely nobody out there who wanted to crack at these two world titles besides Chordale Booker. I just don't believe it, man. You take a look at Chordale Booker, his ranking, you see, alright, he's ranked number 5th by the WBO. But if you really get into it and you kind of crack this open and you see how he achieved this ranking with the WBO, it's very fishy to say the least. So we're going to get into kind of talking about his last 6 fights, and then we're going to talk about kind of the criteria that you have to meet to get a top ranking with the WBO, and how, they're able to kind of manipulate this system to allow the championship fighter to have these offshoot fights that don't really mean anything, that just garner the promotion some free money and an easy victory for the world champion. So I'm just going to break this down a little more just to get you guys a little inside glimpse into kind of how shady the system is. So the official ruling from the WBO for ranking a top-ranked fighter and how they determine who, is their top-ranked guys, according to the official WBO ratings criteria, there's a positive emphasis on professional record with special emphasis on recent activities is a significant factor. It's also important to note that boxing rankings can be influenced by various factors beyond the quality of recent opponents, including the boxer's overall record, activity level, and compliance with organizational criteria. So basically, according to the WBO themselves, you could just essentially go out and get 8 or 9 wins against absolute nobodies, and in their criteria, they could actually squeeze that guy who has 8 or 9 wins against nobodies into the top 10 or top 5 of the division to just feed one of their champions a nothing fight. This is a problem. Can you imagine in the context if this were to happen in UFC? Imagine if one of the world champions in UFC were to just randomly take a fight against some guy who was on a 6-fight win streak against all 6 guys who were not one of them was top 10 ranked. This would just not happen, and it would not be allowed in the UFC. The public outrage would just be far too great. So, I think it's just safe to say that Chordale Booker should have never been in there in the first place. By all means necessary, this guy's a nobody. I'm already starting to see the sentiment going around online underneath some of the highlight videos that I've already seen for this fight, where people are saying, damn, this guy's dangerous, he got him out of there already. Like, dude, what do you expect? Fundora, at the end of the day, does have a seasoned resume, and he's been in there with some top caliber guys. So this is what exactly you would expect him to do, and if he did anything less, it would be concerning. Again, Chordale Booker does not have one single victory over a top 10 fighter. He's never been in there even with a former or current world champion up until tonight. The guy's last 6 fights were against all people who were universally unrecognized to have any significant ranking in any of the major sanctioning bodies in boxing. So it's like, what do you expect? Don't look at this win by Sebastian Fundora and think that this guy is a beast, because in my opinion, and statistically, it doesn't really prove anything. Like, it really shouldn't. I think the next logical pick for Fundora would be a fight with Vergil Ortiz Jr. Vergil Ortiz Jr. holds the WBC interim championship, whereas Fundora actually holds the legitimate title. Inherently, you cannot have an interim champion when there's an active fighting champion that's fighting. It just kind of voids out what interim actually means. So that kind of seems like a no-brainer, but with the politics we have in boxing, don't be surprised if that fight doesn't get made. However, if it does get made, my prediction for that fight would be Vergil Ortiz Jr. has a field day with this guy and savagely knocks him out. Fundora stands there like a fucking statue. He has no head movement. I mean, Chordale Booker was even able to get a couple shots on this guy. I mean, and Chordale Booker's a guy who it looked like to me, he didn't really have any significant power. He didn't really bring anything that was elite to the table. And he was able to land a couple good shots on Fundora. Sure, they didn't really do anything. But when you have a guy in there like Virgil Ortiz swinging in there trying to take your head off with deadly precision, I mean, man, it's really hard to see a guy like Virgil Ortiz not mopping the floor of Fundora. Some other viable fights that could be made. We got guys like Jermell Charlo. He's the former undisputed junior middleweight champion. He definitely presents a high-profile matchup that could significantly bolster Fundora's legacy. So, you know, I know he's been kind of in the cut lately and nobody really knows what he's up to. He seems to have taken a lot of time off since his last fight, but surely you can make a case for him. Can't forget about Errol Spence Jr. Despite previous negotiations falling through, I would think that a future bout with Spence remains lucrative for him. You could surely make a case for Spence. I mean, Spence is a guy who's coming off a loss against Crawford, but other than that, had a very dominant career. It's really hard for me not to see him being a possibility. Another guy that's really, really interesting is Bakram Murtazaliyev. He's the current IBF 154-pound title holder, and he just got done having his way with Tim Tszyu. I mean, he destroyed him. Now, let's not forget that Sebastian Fundora only has those titles because he took them off Tim Tszyu's waist. And the interesting thing that I think that is about that fight is Tim Tszyu, if you watch that fight, he was having his way with Sebastian Fundora at the first start of that fight. He was really getting through to Fundora, and I think that the only thing that really changed the course of the fight was Tim Tszyu sustained a massive cut. I mean, it was one of the worst cuts we've ever seen in the sport. This guy was leaking like a sieve. It's really hard to have a competitive fight going on when you got blood leaking all in your eyes. So Tim Tszyu's a warrior. He didn't pull a Gervonta Davis and take a fucking knee and have his corner wipe off his face. He fought through to the end, and he lost. So I think a fight with Bakram, a guy who destroyed Tim Tszyu, would be really interesting. And it really is hard not to imagine Bakram running through Fundora. Another guy, Serhei Bohachuk. He's the Ukrainian guy who had that toe-to-toe war with Virgil Ortiz Jr. I mean, that was a neck-and-neck fight. I watched that fight live, and man, that was close. So considering, you know, the way I would imagine Virgil Ortiz Jr. mops the floor of Fundora, I gotta believe Serhei would be in there for a good old shot at that title. I don't think he's got any scheduled fights upcoming, so I would think being able to squeeze him in there might be a possibility. That's definitely compelling. And then you got one other guy I can think of, Charles Conwell. I mean, currently he's ranked second by the WBO and third by the WBC. So he's definitely a viable option. So this guy's got plenty of fights that he can pick from, and we'll see with time. Now, if he gets another one of these fights against one of these random offshoot guys that nobody really knows, you know, it's safe to say he's a cherry-picking champion who's going to be holding on to this belt for dear life. And that's not something we haven't seen before in this sport. So I think the point of this video was just to kind of express how kind of weird it was that this fight was even made in the first place, and how the WBO has certain criteria that allows them to essentially, you know, allow these fighters to get these offshoot fights by allowing a guy like, you know, Chordale to string together 6 fights against nobodies essentially, and then somehow based upon that, it allows them to squeeze him into a top 5 position. That was the first point. And then the second point I guess I want to hammer home is just don't be looking at this fight thinking, man, Sebastian Fundora really had a good victory here. Good for him that he got the victory. Good for him, man. But this guy, and again, it's not a knocking to Chordale Booker. Good for him for getting this fight. You know, I'm sure it's going to get him some money in his pocket and help support his family. This guy should not have been in there in the first place, and if Sebastian Fundora did anything less than what he did tonight, it would have been very concerning. So if Fundora did exactly what he was supposed to do tonight against a guy who on paper shouldn't have brought much of any kind of challenge to him. So we'll kind of see how this develops and how this moves forward. I'll be excited to see who Fundora takes on next. And with that, I'm signing off.